What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Boozers Basketball Podcast. I'm Neil Joshi, along with my co-host Vanik Panosian and Panos George. How are we all doing tonight, guys?
Good, man. Excited.
Yeah, good.
Wait, baby.
Awesome. We have
Off-season
officially
excitement.
reached the NBA offseason, and the first big event is the NBA draft. So we brought in our resident Houston Rockets fan, Vanik Panosian. It's going to be a big day for the Rockets in a couple of days. So he's here with all the draft insights. And we got Panos George, who will be freestyling on some stuff for us. So let's get started. When we're looking at this draft, there's three players that really jump off the page in terms of they've clearly emerged as the cream of the crop. And we're talking about Jabari Smith, Chet Holmgren, and Paolo Banchero. So Vanig, the Rockets have the third pick in the draft. So they're really going to have an easy decision, quote unquote, with who they decide to take. But in your estimation, what do you think is the best case scenario for Houston on Thursday night?
Best case scenario is that Jabari goes first, Chet goes second, and Paolo falls to the Rockets. Like you said, Rockets have the easiest job in the world. Basically, they're gonna get one of those three guys, so they can't really mess it up. At this point, as a Rockets fan, I'm pretty emotionally vested in Paolo just because I've been reading so much about him, watching so much tape, and honestly, I think Paolo realistically is the number one prospect. But what we've seen with the NBA and a lot of these drafts is GMs and everybody always bets on on the potential of a player. So I think we know what we have with Paolo, and Paolo's probably the number one pick in any other circumstance. But because there's so much unknown with Jabari and Chet, teams are willing to gamble on players like that because their ceiling might be higher. So Jabari kind of came out of nowhere. Chet, we don't know how his game will translate. And like I said, those guys are probably not as good of a finished product as Paolo. I think Paolo, wherever he lands at, he's gonna be your rookie of the year. He's gonna come in and he's gonna have an immediate impact. The dude's got the size. The dude's got the offensive skill set. So I think best case scenario is Paolo does fall to the third spot and the Rockets make the easy decision.
How do you think Paolo fits in with what the Rockets are looking for to fill out their roster right now?
See, with the Rockets, our team is so young and we're so early in the rebuild. Like again, when you approach any draft, you're taking best player available, and minus Jalen Green and Sengun. Obviously, we're pretty committed to him as well. Kevin Porter Jr.'s on a trial year. This season's going to be big to see if we're going to extend him or not. But then basically besides that, I mean, any other roster spots are open. I think Paolo comes in, you could play him at the 3 or the 4 easy. The dude is almost 7 feet and 250 pounds and has an NBA body. So I think he comes in and he's, immediate starter. And with Jalen Green, man, we're going to be a fun, fast-paced, exciting team to watch.
Yeah, one thing I really wanted to note about Paolo is he was really unselfish at Duke. He was really good about facilitating the offense, passing the ball when needed. And I think that'll be great for a young Rockets team that's really starting to figure out their identity and get these players meshing together in a significant way.
Bonnie, I was gonna ask you real quick, does he have any weaknesses that they're concerned about?
I think Paolo's biggest knock has been, which I think is super, super weak, is just defense. I think defensively he's got room to grow, but he's so young, man. That's an area that definitely he can improve upon. Plus, I think some of the defensive, maybe him taking his foot off the gas pedal with defense was because he was playing like with players like Mark Williams, who was I'm sure we'll talk about him in this podcast, but Mark Williams was defensive player of the year in the conference. So I think some of it was just because he was playing with such other good defensive players on his team. Even who's their point guard? I'm blanking out. But anyway, like I said, I think that's probably Paolo's knock, but I think he'll be fine.
Panos, out of the top three, Jabari, Chet, or Paolo, who are you most excited to see play in the NBA?
Probably the hype around Chet, just because I want to see how he adapts to the NBA. I mean, there's a lot of talk about him. He's a freshman. He's a rim protector. I've heard like his comparisons to players like anywhere from Kevin Durant to like to me, it's more of like a Porzingis type of player. But like I don't know, I kind of want to see like I know he can create his own shot. He has a nice jumper. He plays defense pretty well. To me, it's more like how's his body going to be able to keep up against some of the bigger NBA bodies? You know what I mean? Like the Joker or like Cat Williams. You know what I'm saying? I'm sorry, not Cat Williams. Carl Anthony Towns, Embiid, those type of players. And
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
bam, it's just
I
you know,
100% agree with you.
Hey, I like
We
Cat.
got a Cat Williams reference early in the podcast.
Cat Williams
Hey,
can probably body him.
before we move forward, somebody's got to say Jimmy Butler before, just for Amir's, because like
Oh
every
yeah,
podcast
should we say it on three?
Miami Heat related. So hey, Jimmy Butler, man, just for
Jimmy
you, Amir.
Butler, yeah. Jimmy
All right.
Butler.
Pour one out for Jimmy, as
Jimmy
Amir's about to be a
Buckets.
father.
Yeah, that's right. Love
Yeah,
you.
so Panos, you bring up some excellent points. One thing about Chet that just jumps off the page for me is just the elite defensive presence and phenomenal rim protection. You did mention that he is a good shooter, but if he's going to be bodying up some of the elite bigs in the league, you wonder how he's going to be able to do it if he's checking in under 200 pounds. Like that is already a tough hurdle to climb. And if defense is the skill that people are banking on when they draft you, that seems problematic. But if he is able to really shoot from 3-point range, that will add an entirely new dimension to his game. And it almost comes across like he doesn't have a true comp at this point. The Kevin Durant thing makes a little bit of sense because he does have the ball handling, he can shoot, and he's a good passer. But I don't know if he's going to be able to develop the kind of offensive game that Kevin Durant has. I think he'll be successful as a spot up shooter, whether he gets drafted by Orlando or Oklahoma City, or unlikely, but maybe Houston. So I think out of the top three, Chet personally seems like the one most likely to bust, because I think Paolo, to your point, Bonig is really a pretty polished player at this point in time. He can come right in and he could probably give you like 17 to 20 points a game. Jabari Smith, I really watched him a lot at Auburn in college, and he was a phenomenal player that was almost held back by some deficiencies that his team had at the point guard position. If he plays with a point guard that can put him in positions to succeed, I think he could be contending with Paolo for Rookie of the Year. So those are my early impressions of the top three. Chet Holmgren, he'll probably give you a double-double, but I still think there is some bust potential associated with Chet. What are your thoughts on that, Bonnie?
Yeah, I agree. Chet you guys give player comps, but I don't think he's a Durant, and he's definitely going to be playing the 5. He's too tall. And if he fell to Houston, I would be happy. Again, like I said, I'll take any of those 3. And where like the Rockets have been the worst defensive team the last 2 seasons in a row, when we've locked up the worst record during the regular season. So getting somebody like Chet, I'd be completely fine with it. I think he'd actually be a good compliment, because then you put Sengun at the 4. But his frame, man, is concerning, right? You kind of hear both things, where it's like, oh, well, he's so light. Like that's actually, for a big man, it's easier on the knees, and like versus like somebody like a Yao, where like we know his career was cut so short because he was so big and heavy. But like I agree with you. I think his bust potential is the highest for sure out of that, because does his game translate? We'll have to wait and see.
So moving on to the 4th pick, Sacramento owns that pick, and most people are projecting Jaden Ivey to be the 4th best prospect on the board. So Panos, I'm going to ask you, when we look at Jaden Ivey and his fit with the Kings, Sacramento already has a couple of guards that are relatively young, in De'Aaron Fox and Davion Mitchell. If you're a GM for the Kings, do you just draft the best player available, or are you concerned about fit when you are such a team that's struggling to even get into the play-in conversation right now?
I mean, like if I were comparing it to like fantasy basketball, I'd probably draft the best player available. And we've know like everyone, like we've been reading, like he's been jumping up in the like in the ranks as far as like going drafting wise. Some people even have him above Jabari Smith too. So I don't know. That's a good question. It's, I mean, like you said, they have Fox and Mitchell, so it's kind of weird. And I think they're in talks to get is it Collins from the Hawks too?
I did see that headline on
So
on social
I
media. So
you wonder if someone's probably going to be moved. I mean, I'm not sure because I mean, it's kind of a difficult question to answer for me. But like, I mean, he's a great player. He's explosive. I mean, he finishes pretty well around the basket. I don't know.
so with these trade rumors, do you think it makes sense? Like if Jaden Ivey is the clear fourth prospect on the board and you already have your two guards filled out, then you can trade that pick away and get an established player that helps your team with someone like John Collins, who is pretty talented as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's not a bad idea too to trade the pick away. I mean, maybe trade down and get an additional 2 picks somewhere else in the draft. I mean,
How about you, Vaughn? What do you think about that
Dude.
whole question of like, do you get the best player available or do you need to really figure out what your team needs?
Hey, just first thing first, leave it to the Kings to figure out how to mess this up. The team that every season drafts the person like that makes you scratch your head. So yeah, Jaden Ivey needs to be 4 off the board. Because the guy is going to be a supreme talent, man. I would again, another guy that I wouldn't be sad if he was on the Rockets. I mean, player comp wise, if you're watching him play and his offensive skill set and explosive athleticism, the guy looks like a little bit of a hybrid of, early Russ, maybe even what Ja Morant's doing right now. And he's just like a big bucket scorer, like one of those exciting scorers to watch. I mean, we saw it at Purdue. He got insanely better from his freshman to his sophomore year. But I think honestly, for the Kings, I would always go best player or available, right? Best player available. But with the Kings, with what you just said, with the guard play they already have, I would, if that trade offer is available with the Hawks, I'd probably take it. You've got Sabonis there. You add Collins and then you roll with Fox and Mitchell. It's not bad because I don't know, like, the other names that are kind of circling that area. You got like Shaden Sharp and Keegan Murray and all that kind of stuff. I don't think the Kings are the Kings, if anything we know about them, they're not good at developing people, even if they get the right person there. So I'd say probably take that trade with the Collins and then it would be their best option.
Yeah. So to your point about them not being able to develop players, it doesn't make sense for them to turn that 4 pick into like multiple draft picks lower down the board where the odds of hitting something are lower and it's based on your organization's ability to build somebody up.
Yeah. Correct.
So it's yeah.
This is a team that literally just traded Tyrese Halliburton away, who was like the Kings fan
Shocking.
base just rallied around somebody that they like loved and was like, hey, committed to the team, and they just up and send them, to Indiana. I mean, it's the Kings are been a train wreck for, since the Chris Webber era ended, man. It's pretty sad, but shout out to all the Kings fans out there. I feel your pain, man.
I was gonna add like the Ja Morant and like Russell Westbrook thing. Like he loves those 2 players. Like he watches their game and tape on them. And also like about the Kings, like Mike Brown is coming in as their new coach. So it's, I just want to see what type of schemes he's gonna have or like what, you know what I'm saying?
He's got the Kings. They like change coaches like minimum every 2 years, dude. The Kings. They just need a complete facelift, dude.
Yeah, and it seems more likely that they screwed this up with a guy like Jaden Ivey on the board for them instead of it actually working out in their favor.
Yeah.
So moving on to the 5th pick, that is owned by Detroit. So Detroit really hit a home run at the top spot last year when they took Cade Cunningham. He looks like he's going to be a key part of their future. And now Detroit is in a position where they're just looking to continue accumulating assets. And personally, I really think Keegan Murray can add a nice dimension to this team. He was a great player at Iowa. He's a bucket getter, and he will give Kate Cunningham a reliable number two. What do you think about that, Monik? Do you really think that Keegan Murray is someone that can assume a number two role on a team that's trying to get back to respectability?
Yeah, I don't know. Like Keegan Murray, I like him. He's just not exciting. So I think he's gonna be a good rotational piece, and he like a solid power forward. But I don't know, man. If I'm the Pistons at that spot, am I kind of going with what I think is a safe pick, or is this a pick that I'm going to use to gamble with maybe potentially somebody that's a little bit of a higher ceiling?
Gotcha.
Again, the Pistons are very similar to the Rockets in that they're trying to fill roster positions, right? Like you said, they built off Cade last year. So they can't really go wrong with any pick. I know Isaiah Stewart had a really, really bad season last year, but the year prior, he was looking a lot more promising. Who knows what's going to happen with Jeremy Grant? And then Sadiq Bey finally kind of started breaking out last year, but they've had a couple of misses as well with some of their rookies on that team. So, yeah, Keegan totally could be a good fit. But like I said, I think if I'm the Pistons, I'm probably looking elsewhere.
Okay, so you want someone that has a higher ceiling and gives you upside potential. Is there someone out of the top four, almost kind of unanimous on the big board, that you think would be a better fit in terms of giving them someone that could really hit?
Dude, I think the name's still out there, and this is probably the riskiest pick in the draft. Is Shaedon Sharpe. The guy has canceled workouts because I think his workouts were not going well. He came out of high school as a top 3 prospect, goes to Kentucky, doesn't play any games, so we don't have any tape on him as far as playing against playing any meaningful college basketball games. But as far as what people had seen and what his potential was, the guy, like I said, could. If I'm going to gamble, I'm going to gamble on him versus what I think I'm going to get with Keegan. And this is kind of where I think this is kind of where the NBA is at again, right? Like there's a lot more gambling and throwing all your chips in versus like what I know I might get. And the other thing too with Keegan, this is kind of crazy too, because this dynamics changed with the NBA draft as well. It used to be valued when somebody went to college and stayed in school and then came out after 3 or 4 years, right? Your Tim Duncans, right, from Wake Forest, your Chris Paul, these guys that stayed in college, and you're like, oh man, he stayed and he improved his game every season, right? Now it's actually like a negative. So Keegan's actually gonna turn 22 this year, right? So like he's old, right? And so maybe he's like kind of peaked as a player versus like, oh, I'm getting the 18, 19-year-old kid and I don't really know what he's gonna turn into. I mean, I think of, it's just funny because I think of like, you guys remember Jonathan Bender?
Mm-hmm.
Jonathan Bender was like one of those guys back when you're like, dude, that guy's coming out of high school, and then they're out of the league after their rookie deal's basically done, if not before. So Shaedon Sharpe, like I said, if I'm the Pistons right now and where my team's at, I'm okay with gambling still.
Shaedon Sharpe is definitely a curiosity for me because, as you mentioned, there's pretty much no tape of him. He was supposed to go to Kentucky, where you would really expect him to start really growing into a great player, but he pretty much sat the season out, if my understanding is correct. And he's failing out on workouts, not having great interviews. So he seems like the ultimate wild card for me. And to your point, he's still in the top 10, top 7, even top 5 discussion because he does have those physical traits that lead you to believe that he could be a star in this league. For sure.
I wanted to ask, if like, say the Kings pass up on Jaden Ivey, do you think, I would think Detroit would pull the trigger on him, right? And
Oh yeah, totally. Yes.
Like 100%. Next to Cade Cunningham, like it'd be perfect.
Ivy and Cade would be ridiculously awesome.
Mm-hmm.
And I totally agree with that. I mean, there's no way you can see Ivy falling in this draft. Someone is going to bet on that athleticism. Like the Ja Morant comparisons are valid, even though I hate player comps, but he just jumps out of the building. He's a bucket getter. He's got the tenacity in getting to the basket. If Jaden Ivey just improves his defense even slightly and becomes like a neutral defender, he could have a great career in this league. So if I'm Detroit and Jaden Ivey's there, I can't wait. But if Jaden Ivey's gone and you have to really think about the next tier of prospects, Shaden Sharp could be on the board. Keegan Murray is being mocked at that position in certain drafts. So I think that's really where the draft really starts to get interesting if we assume that the Kings actually are smart and take the right pick if they're not going to trade it away.
There's in this draft, there's definitely tiers. And once you kind of go out, outside of Ivy, you go into that next tier, it drops off. Like from Ivy and then the big three that we talked about, I think you got a lot more wiggle room. And then that's where as a team too, you're kind of identifying like, hey, like, what are our needs, right? We talk about best player, but I'm also looking at like, dude, do I need a center to round out my team? What type of big do I need? Do I need a defensive minded wing? Do I need a 3-point guy? So you got to be a little bit more calculated, I think, with those picks.
It seems like there are a lot of good quality bigs in this draft, but I agree with you when you say that there are tiers and then things really start to get uncertain once you get past like Ivy at 4. I think you can really start putting maybe 5 to 10 in the same sort of tier. Is there anyone? So you mentioned Shaden Sharp is one guy that you're interested to see how he materializes. Is there anybody else who's kind of like a peer with Shaden Sharp or Keegan Murray that you're excited to see where they go?
I like the bigs that are in the back half of the lottery pick. So Duren is somebody that I'm like excited to see where he lands. I would, again, another guy, because I know what our Rocket needs are. I paid close attention to the guy's electric, super athletic. I mean, I know you don't like player comps. I love player comps. So I would say, dude, on a high side, like I could see him like a DeAndre Jordan-ish type of guy with hopefully, and like I said, these guys aren't limited, right? We don't know what kind of offense they could add to their game. There's also like on a low side, he could be, you guys remember Keon Clark? I used to love Keon Clark, man. Super athletic, scrawny, bounced around, but he was on the Kings for a while too. And then, Mark Williams isn't too far behind him at the center position, man. Mark Williams, we already talked about defensively with Duke and, what he did in the tournament and even during the regular season, man. The guy, he has kind of that Clint Capella upside, right? You block, rebound, and just really, really anchor your defense. I also am big on Jeremy Sohan. So he is the guy's one of those total like utility knife type of players. Again, high motor. And my player comp for that guy would be like a Draymond dude. I think that guy's going to have the potential to guard anybody from 1 to 5. So again, these are guys that I'm hoping the Rockets could potentially move up to draft, but we'll see.
Those are some good names that you brought in there. And Sohan, yeah, he can pretty much guard any position on the floor. And it seems like his only sort of detriment in his skill set is that he's not a great shooter and he might not be able to translate well offensively. So, Panos, when you look at a player like that who has like one skill that is really apparent, but then there's like a limited weakness that could really affect the trajectory of their career, how do you think an evaluator looks at that when they're trying to make a draft decision?
I mean, it just depends on, because, like when teams invite these players to work out with them, I mean, if they see some weaknesses and if they think they can work with them, I think they're going to take him in a draft. But I mean, like these players that get drafted, I feel like they learn as their career goes on. I mean, it's not like if it's a defensive thing, like anything defense, you can teach. Shooting, you can teach. I mean, you saw Lonzo Ball come into the league and he shot poorly from 3, and then he leaves LA, gets a shooting coach, and he's like I think close to 40%. So, I mean, I think teams, it depends on the positions too. Like, are they like a contending team? You know what I mean? Like, are they fighting for a championship, or are they going to be like somewhere down below? It just depends on their ranking, or like, to me, that's how I feel.
This is where, again, not to beat up on the Kings, but like where a player gets drafted matters, especially for somebody that isn't like polished yet, right? You want to go into the right situation. You want to be, I mean, dude, Kuminga and Moody last year's draft. Like, talk about ideal landing spots for those guys to go and win a championship in their first season, to go and watch how Clay, Draymond, and Curry practice, train, and win. And you know, in a season or two, when their time comes up, I mean, they're going to transition perfectly, right? Versus if you go to kind of like, no offense, like any deadbeat kind of a roster, yeah, man, you could really be setting yourself up for failure. And if your goals are just to get to even the next contract off your rookie deal, like I said, I think people are looking at that king spot at 4, and they're like, dude, I hope they don't draft me.
Yeah, and
I mean,
to
I was gonna say
add to that point. Yeah, go ahead, Benes.
sorry, I was gonna say it could be a blessing to be on a team that's like the Kings or something. I mean, nothing. No, this isn't like a jab to like Vonnegut, but like I mean, look at Jalen Green and the Rockets. Like he started off a little poorly in the first half, but second half, I think he was like the best rookie out there in the second half. And Cade Cunningham too, like Evan Mobley. I mean, yeah, that draft class was much more deeper with bigger talent, but I mean, like Bonnie said too, but yeah, it depends on where you get drafted, which team.
Yeah, I was going to say even someone like Andrew Wiggins, who was a number 1 pick and was on Minnesota for several years. He needed to get into the right situation before you really start to see him show you what he can do. And he's 27 now. So sometimes these things take years to materialize for you to get to the right situation that you need to get to. And when we're talking about some of these players that have some really big flaws in their game, it's really going to come down to, does the organization have the ability to build you up as you're going through the early years of your career? And it's pretty clear that Sacramento is not one of those places. So,
yep.
All right.
Is
So moving
Fox
on.
an all-star? Has he ever been an all-star?
I don't think so.
Who?
De'Aaron Fox.
No, I don't think so.
No, okay.
Panos, are there any international players that you are looking at and you want to see how they do in this year's draft class?
I mean, I think I don't think anyone mentioned it, but I'm probably going to butcher his name right now. But Jovic, is that Jovic? How do you say it?
Not to be confused with the Joker.
Yeah, I mean, he looked interesting, but like Bonnie said, like this was off camera, but like he mentioned that he could be like a 2-year type of player and out of the league type of person. You know what I mean? Like, but sorry, like my nose is running. I'm sorry. But yeah, that's one player I want to see come up and see what he does. I mean, he looks like he's talented. He's a what, 6'10", 6'11" guy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think he's 6'11".
6'11".
Really, 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 really nice shot. But I think one of those guys, usually it just depends on how Euro game translates, man. Sometimes it's hard, right? You don't know if you're gonna get a Luka or you're gonna get what's his name? Denny, that's on the Wizards. Some of these guys that remember Dragan Bender? Dragan Bender was like the 4th overall pick to the Phoenix Suns. He's not even in the league anymore. So again, a bit another one that's a big gamble. But yeah, he's probably going to be in your teens as far as I think draft wise.
Yeah, I think they were comparing him to like his role could be like as far as like wing size, like Thibault, like or like a Danny Green type of wing player. But
I'd say more of a Danny Greenish, man. Thibault's trying to learn how to shoot. He's all steals and blocks. Jovic definitely can shoot the ball.
Do you guys know how he translates on defense?
Yeah, that's definitely an area of opportunity for him. He's pretty scrawny, and I think the NBA game, and he's lacking athleticism. So what's not gonna his shooting will keep him on the court. His defense will get him put on the bench.
So moving ahead to the Rockets pick at 17, assuming they get Paolo with the 3rd pick and they get the 3-4 position entrenched in the starting lineup, what do you think would be a great scenario for the Rockets at 17?
So I'm going to say option 1. I'm hoping the Rockets are still going to be making moves. Eric Gordon is on the trade block. We just acquired the 26th pick from the Dallas Mavericks. So I'm hoping somebody bites on us packaging 17 and 26 to move up and potentially take, like I said, either Duran or Mark Williams is my go-to. But if we end up everything holds and we end up having the 17th pick, I'm gonna hope somebody like a Mark Williams falls. If not, other names that I like in that area, I'm a big fan of Tari Eason. Tari Eason my father-in-law is from Ohio, so we all watch every Cincinnati game, and he started his career as a freshman in Cincinnati. When he transferred to LSU is when he blew up. And on LSU, his game is still very raw. But the things that I like about him are he's again high motor, high energy guy. He's almost a little redundant maybe for the Rockets because he's kind of like a Jayshawn Tate, but I think he's better defensively. And then his measurements and stuff like that, as far as like how combines went, dude, the guy's got very similar as far as like palm size, all that stuff to kind of like a Kawhi. So that obviously, anytime you're talking about that and from a defensive standpoint, that stuff kind of excites me, especially for a team like the Rockets where we are atrocious at defense. So I'm a big Tari Eason fan, and like I said, if Mark Williams and those bigs are out of the way, then I'd definitely love to take him at 17.
So the big thing is just getting some rim protection where it's available, with Mark Williams and Jalen Duren really being those standout prospects, but they're rated too high for them to probably be available at 17.
Yeah. See, ideally, the Hornets move off of one of those picks since they have 13 and 15. If the Rockets could just move up to probably one of those spots, I think they get probably not Duren, but they might have a shot at Mark Williams.
Yeah, and that's because the Hornets are looking for the same thing with their pick.
Yep.
So, Panos, when it comes to anybody that made the playoffs, are there any teams that you're looking at to see what they do with this draft? Teams that might have lost in the first or the second round that are trying to make that next jump up by getting like a solid contributor as like a sixth or seventh man? Is there any team that you're looking at?
Well, I mean, like for example, my Lakers don't even have a pick in this draft. I think they're trying to buy a pick, and the Warriors are trying to sell one. So they should probably be talking to them and trying to move up somewhere to get a draft if they're trying to move anything like Russell Westbrook around the league, which probably won't happen.
Hey, bro, you guys still got Austin Reeves, all right? Don't worry, Austin Reeves, baby.
He's probably the best thing that's happened to us post Caruso, and that's not too long ago.
I agree.
AR-47, is that what LeBron calls him?
I wouldn't really call him that.
He's a much weaker version than Caruso, but he at least he brings the effort, and I think he made some watchable moments from the Lakers last season.
We got so much to talk about as it relates to free agency, but I'll close off this episode by asking you guys one question with two parts. Who do you think is going to exceed their expectation as a draft pick? And then who do you think is going to bust as a draft pick in this draft? Panos, I'll start with you.
I like Vonnick's Banchero dude. I think he'll do well with Houston. Hopefully he does get down to Houston on the third pick. And I like Ivy as well with the comparisons. I mean, I know, like you said, no player comps for you, but like I like Vonnick and me, like we like player comps. It gives me an idea of what type of player he'll be. But or to shoot for. But like, yeah, I like the John Morant, Russell Westbrook thing with him. He has a high ceiling for sure. And definitely the bust. I mean, the bust is there with Chet. Like, I don't think he's going to live up to the hype. I just can't see it. I don't know. Just, if he proves me wrong, great. Good for him, but it's hard for me to see it.
I have the same thoughts as you about Chet. So, Vonnick, I'll turn it to you. So who do you think is going to exceed expectations, and who are you thinking could be a bust in this draft?
To keep it a little bit different than what you guys said, I agree with you guys completely on the Chet. I think bust potential, even though I said the Pistons should gamble on him, would be Shaedon Sharpe, right? The guy we don't know. And another good example of that is, like, you guys know Amani Bates, right? Amani Bates was another top recruit, and he went and played for Memphis, and he had an awful year. And so he's a guy that, like Shaedon Sharpe, had he sat out, we're probably talking about him in the lottery, right? So he kind of did himself a disservice by going to college and playing, because he was so he played so bad. So Shaden Sharp could totally be a bust. I think somebody that could be a sleeper that becomes somebody really, really good a couple of years down the road that I like is Dyson Daniels. Dyson Daniels is pretty raw. He played for the Ignite. But during the combines, he looked stellar. You could definitely tell he's worked on his game. I think he's probably gonna go between 7 and 11 pick range. But I think that, a couple of years down the road that we could be talking about, like, man, Dyson Daniels was a steal. So a name to watch out for.
That's a great pick. I don't know much about Dyson Daniels either, but now I'm going to be looking out for him now that you mentioned him on Thursday night. Well, that's all the time that we have for today here on the Boozers Basketball Podcast. Please like and subscribe, and we will see you very soon as we start our free agency chatter going, and there will be plenty to talk about. Thanks a lot, guys.
Thank you.
Later.